Welcome back, everyone, to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. You are tuning into episode 50 of the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. This episode is going to be the Week 4 NFL recap. Before we jump in, please make sure you press that follow button so you guys will be on track and ready to listen to the next 50 episodes of the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast, as well as check out the Instagram at Wedge 52 Gridiron. And go ahead and press the follow button right there as well. Appreciate the support and the listens so far. With that being said, let's jump into today's episode, the Week 4 recap like I mentioned. Let's start off with recap, thoughts, and stats on every single Week 4 matchup, as well as some top threes for the main stat categories after the Week 4 around the league. And then we'll get into Week 4's him performance of the week, as well as Week 5 matchups and a quick preview and thoughts off the top of my head, kind of maybe one or two things that I'm going to be looking for or kind of, basing my thoughts off of for each matchup. And then my Week 5 picks. Make sure you guys stay tuned all the way through to the end of the episode to hear who I think will win every single Week 5 matchup. Let's jump in with last week's Thursday Night Football matchup, the Lions and the Packers. The Lions took care of business 34-20, really proved that they mean business and that they can beat a Packers team that has looked fairly solid throughout the year. A very good defense, a good rushing attack that kind of, is a little below their standards right now just because of Aaron Jones and him coming back from injury, things like that. But the Lions and the Packers, really, I was watching, wanted to see how this game played out. The Lions ended up taking care of business 34-20. Jared Goff went 19 for 28, 210 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 5 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown, as well as Josh Reynolds had 3 catches for 69 yards. David Montgomery had himself a day, 32 carries, 121 yards and 3 touchdowns, as well as rookie tight end Sam Laporta had played very well. Once again, he's really emerging as a great option for Jared Goff in that Lions offense. He had 4 catches for 56 yards in the Thursday Night Football matchup there. On the other side of the ball, Aiden Hutchinson had a pretty solid day, 2 tackles, 1.5 sacks for him. And then the Packers offense kind of got shut down a little bit. Jordan Love, 23 for 36, 246 yards, 1 touchdown, not a bad day, as well as 2 interceptions though. Wide receiver Romeo Doubs, whichever it is continuing having a very solid year so far. For that Packers receiving core, 9 catches for 95 yards for him. And then Aaron Jones, like I said, coming back from that injury, the hamstring, I believe, had 5 carries for just 18 yards. Defensive star, kind of in the making, Quay Walker, had 19 tackles against Detroit. Moving over to the next game of the weekend, the London game, Falcons and Jaguars. Jaguars won that one 23-7 in what's basically becoming, their second home field. The Jaguars have played the most games in London. Quarterback Desmond Ridder for the Falcons went 19 for 31, 191 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks as well. Bijan Robinson continued his upward trend after kind of a little bit lesser of a game against Detroit the previous week. Bijan had 14 carries for 105 yards, plus 5 receptions for 32. And tight end Jonnu Smith, 6 receptions for 95 yards. And wide receiver Drake London, 3 catches for 28 yards and a touchdown. Kyle Pitts is still yet to get heavily involved in that offense in his 3rd year now. He had just 2 catches for 21 yards. The Falcons really just... from what I've seen, are just not even looking towards his direction. I do not believe he's getting, good target shares for that offense, which you would expect him to be getting with their lack of other weapons surrounding, Bijan Robinson, really. And then you have Drake London, and, that next spot should be a clear cut to Kyle Pitts. But that has not been the case so far this season. On the Jaguars side, Trevor Lawrence, 23 for 30, 207 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. Wide receiver Christian Kirk, 8 catches for 84 yards, and wide receiver Calvin Ridley, 2 catches for 38 yards and another touchdown on the season. He has, not been elite, definitely not been in that top 5, top 10 wide receivers so far this season. But I would say, without even looking at numbers for everyone, that he probably is in that 10 to 20 range so far statistically, which is impressive to see after he's missed 2 to 3 seasons since he's last played a full season there. And then Darius Williams for the Jaguars had 5 tackles and a interception return for a touchdown, and defensive end Josh Allen for the Jaguars, 3 tackles and 3 sacks on the day across the pond in London. So another successful London trip for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Moving on to the Ravens versus Browns game. Ravens came out on top 28-3. Deshaun Watson developed, kind of had a shoulder injury from previous week, but didn't think it was going to be a factor until kind of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then he was ultimately ruled out Sunday during pregame. So rookie quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson started and went 19 for 36, 121 yards, no touchdowns, and was picked off 3 times by that Baltimore defense that made quite the statement there. If you would like a full deep dive into the Ravens versus Browns game from week 4, please check out yesterday's episode where I fully broke down the Ravens versus Browns game, as well as gave some thoughts and a breakdown on the Steelers and Texans game, which I will talk about here next, and some keys and things to look for in that Ravens-Steelers matchup coming up here in week 5. But other than that, Lamar Jackson had a fantastic day. 15 for 19, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks throwing the ball, as well as 9 carries for 27 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. His 2 passing touchdowns were both to Mark Andrews, who caught those 2 touchdowns along with 5 catches and 80 yards on the day. Moving down to that Texans and Steelers matchup, the Steelers they lost that game 30-6. They got, kind of ran through. Did not look well, really, in any asset of the game. Quarterback Kenny Pickett did suffer a knee injury late in the third quarter, which may be affecting his status for that Baltimore Week 5 matchup. Before the injury, he was 15 for 23, 114 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. Najee Harris had 14 carries for 71 yards, and safety Minka Fitzpatrick had 11 tackles. On the other side there of that matchup, C.J. Stroud is continuing to really ball out as a rookie quarterback. He went 16 for 30, 306 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. His main contributor for that this week was wide receiver Nico Collins, who absolutely balled out. 7 catches for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. The 2 of them also got some help from running back Dameon Pierce, who I think had his best game of the season. 24 carries for 81 yards. That Texans offense had 451 yards of offense last Sunday. Their offense, C.J. Stroud, is definitely looking very good. And, on the flip of that, the Jaguars are, not looking, I didn't project them to be, one of the top 5 teams in the AFC probably. But I do believe the Jaguars are potentially leaving a larger door open for that division title than I had anticipated, as well as the Colts, who I don't think are quite there yet, but they are also still in the mix early in the season here. Moving to the Rams and Colts game, the Rams won 29-26 in overtime. The Rams started out very, very hot, and then, after that, the Colts took over, had a huge second half comeback, sent it into overtime where the Rams eventually won, obviously. Quarterback Anthony Richardson had 11 for 25 completions, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions, as well as 10 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown. A very good day for quarterback Anthony Richardson as well. So 2 young guys, 2 rookies, top 4 selection for both of them. Playing very well last week. Running back Moss had 18 carries for 70 yards. And then Matthew Stafford continued to, find his young receiving core and make plays for them, help them make plays. Stafford was 27 for 40, had 319 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. While running back Kyron Williams continued to show out after the Cam Akers trade that happened 2 weeks ago, with 25 carries for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns, plus 3 receptions for 24 yards. A rookie wide receiver that came out of nowhere, Puka Nacua, had another nice day and got his first career touchdown, along with 9 receptions for 163 yards. And that touchdown was the overtime walk-off touchdown. So definitely cool to see for Puka. It's going to be interesting to see if he can continue to have this success. It's looking like very solid that he is, has the potential to do it. He's been doing it now for 4 weeks. He's setting all sorts of records for rookie receivers in terms of receptions and yards and their pace, and like what legendary receivers have done in their first 4 games. So that definitely helps to see Matthew Stafford as his quarterback, who has been the quarterback for the 2 all-time leading receiving yards in this season, that being in Calvin Johnson, where Matthew Stafford was his quarterback in Detroit, as well as Cooper Kupp just a couple years ago, where Matthew Stafford was the quarterback down there in LA. So Matthew Stafford, props due to him, and let's see what he can make out of Puka Nacua. The Vikings got their first win of the season, 21-13 over the Panthers. Quarterback Bryce Young, 25 for 32, 204 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Wide receiver Adam Thielen, 7 for 76. They did get some help from their defense, although it was not enough. Sam Franklin had a 99-yard pick 6 early in the game off of Kirk Cousins. They were driving, about to score a touchdown, and Mr. Franklin, jumped the route and got all the way to the end zone with the help of a nice block on Kirk Cousins, who, kind of got the double whammy on that one, throwing the pick and getting trucked, trying to prevent the pick 6. But Kirk Cousins turned it around enough to get the victory for his team. Cousins went 12 for 19, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns, and had 2 picks on the day. Running back Alexander Madison, continuing to, kind of prove that he, is worthy of that spot, especially after the Cam Akers trade. Before that, he hadn't really done anything. And now Madison, the past 2 weeks, had solid days, both of the last 2 games. 17 for 95 for him on Sunday. And then Cam Akers did make his Vikings debut, had 5 carries for 40 yards. So very efficient. That's 8 yards per carry. Justin Jefferson had a good game. 6 catches for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Harrison Smith, safety for those Minnesota Vikings, had himself an incredible day. 14 tackles, 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 2 tackles for a loss. Absolutely stud performance by Harrison Smith this week. The Bucs took care of business against the Saints, winning that one 26-9. Derek Carr did play. He went 23 for 37, 127 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And then Alvin Kamara was back and he had 11 carries for 51 yards and 13 receptions for 33 yards only, which is a pretty crazy to think about. It's less than 3 yards per catch from Alvin Kamara, who we're not typically seeing, that low in yards per catch out of him. That's the lowest yards per catch, or yards really, by someone who's had 13 or more receptions in a game by less than half. The previous low was 13 for 71 yards. So definitely interesting there. But it was AK's first game back. And then, for those Buccaneers, the Saints wide receivers struggled a little bit as well. That didn't help with a banged up Derek Carr at quarterback. Michael Thomas, 4 catches for 53 yards. Chris Olave, career lows for catches, He had 1 catch for 4 yards. Both of those career low for Chris Olave in his, year and, now 4-game career. And then Baker Mayfield for those Buccaneers, 25 for 32, 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Another solid day for him. Chris Godwin balled out with 8 catches and 114 yards after Mike Evans left with a hamstring injury after having 3 catches for 40 yards. Defensive back Antoine Winfield Jr. had 9 tackles, 1 sack, and 1 forced fumble and the fumble recovery. So great play by him. We saw several good performances by defensive and offensive players this week. And then Commanders and Eagles. The Commanders put up a very good fight and looked very solid throughout that whole entire game. They lost in overtime, though, 31-34 to the Eagles. Sam Howell looked very accurate, looked very poised throughout the game. 29 for 41, 290 yards, a touchdown, and no interceptions for him, as well as 6 carries for 40 yards. Running back Brian Robinson had 14 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. And scary Terry McLaurin had 8 catches for 86 yards. A couple of those in big moments, like we've been accustomed to kind of seeing from Terry McLaurin, making some spectacular catches when his team needs it the most. Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts went 25 for 37, 319 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day. Running back, Swift, 14 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown. Wide receiver Devontae Smith, 7 carries for 78 yards, and absolutely monster performance by wide receiver A.J. Brown, who had 9 catches for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then another good defensive performance this week by linebacker Nick Morrow, who had 11 tackles, 3 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. The Dolphins got, after putting up 70 points in the week prior to that very poor Denver Broncos defense, they put up just 20 points in a loss to the Bills, 20-48. In that one in Buffalo, Tua went 25 for 35, 282 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Devin Achane followed up his performance of the week 3 with 8 carries for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cool to see that. And then wide receiver Tyreek Hill, 3 catches for 58 yards. Jalen Waddle, 4 catches for 46 yards. On the other side, Josh Allen, 21 for 25, 320 yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground, as well as 4 rushes for 17 yards and a touchdown. So a total of 5 touchdowns on the day for Josh Allen. It definitely helped to have his number 1 wide receiver absolutely balling out. Stephon Diggs had 6 catches for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns. On 1 touchdown alone, he had 3 broken tackles. And then Stephon Diggs was getting the most out of his celebrations last week in Buffalo after, fighting for the touchdown and kind of proving to Miami and the rest of the NFL that the division should still run through Buffalo. We'll see if that trend continues. But Diggs, he was celebrating with the fans' beer. He was celebrating by throwing the football into the second deck almost. So, excellent game by Stephon Diggs. There's a reason that he is and was in the top 5 wide receivers conversation. Check that episode out if you're interested in my top 5 wide receiver rankings. And then a surprising one over there in Tennessee, where the Titans beat the Bengals 27-3. Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense continue to struggle. Joe Burrow and that Bengals team may be considering, having Burrow miss some time, a couple weeks, just try and get more healthy. Burrow went 20 for 30, 165 yards, no touchdowns, and no interceptions. Running back Joe Mixon, 14 carries for 67 yards. Wide receiver Jamar Chase, 7 catches for 73 yards. And on top of it, to add to the Bengals, struggles on offense, wide receiver T. Higgins suffered fractured ribs during that game, and I believe is expected to miss some time with that. The Titans, though, Ryan Tannehill, 18 completions out of 25 attempts, 240 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. King Henry, had a great performance, especially after the week prior, only having 20 total yards. Derrick Henry, said that, proved to himself and his fans that is not the Derrick Henry that we know and are accustomed to. He had 22 carries for 122 yards and a touchdown, as well as a 2-yard touchdown pass against that Bengals defense. Wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins had 4 catches for 63 yards. Tight end Nick Westbrook-Akeen, 5 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown. And the Titans were very, very efficient, 8 for 13 on third down, which definitely helped their chances of, having that win, especially in, somewhat of blowout fashion, 27-3. I would say blowout. Now to the Broncos and the Bears. Absolutely embarrassing loss by the Chicago Bears. I would probably consider them the worst team in the league at this point. The Broncos went on a 24-0 run, starting at the end of the third quarter, the last minute or so, to the end of the game. The Bears, the Bears offense had 471 yards, and they lost. They didn't do anything in that fourth quarter. Justin Fields, though, did play well. 28 for 35, 335 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 1 very, very costly fumble in the fourth quarter, I want to say. It was definitely in that fourth quarter because it was part of the Broncos' comeback run, but very poorly timed fumble by Justin Fields that was returned for a touchdown. And then Justin Fields also had 4 carries for 25 yards on the ground. Running back for the Bears, Khalil Herbert, 18 carries for 103 yards. DJ Moore had his best game as a Bear, 8 catches for 131 yards and a touchdown. I want to say it's either close or I'm correct. That may be more yards than DJ Moore had the previous 3 games combined. It's either close or less than that 131. And then tight end Cole Kmet had himself a nice day despite the loss. 7 catches for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. Russell Wilson was cooking just a little bit. 21 for 28, 223 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Running back Jaleel McLaughlin for those Denver Broncos, 7 carries for 72 yards, as well as 3 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. And then linebacker Nick Bonito from the Broncos, 4 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. The Raiders and Chargers. Chargers took care of business on that one, 24-17. Jimmy Garoppolo was unable to go due to injury. I believe that was a concussion injury. So Aiden O'Connell started. He went 24 for 39, 238 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and he had 2 fumbles lost. He did, however, have 3 rushes for 3 yards and a touchdown. Running back Josh Jacobs had himself a nice little day. 17 carries for 58 yards and a touchdown, as well as 8 catches for 81 yards. And wide receiver Devontae Adams had 8 carries for 75 yards. Defensive end Max Crosby had 8 tackles for 2 sacks. And then, Chargers offensive stats here. Justin Herbert had 13 out of 24 completions, 167 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, as well as 12 carries, 27 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So very good day by Justin Herbert, who also suffered a finger injury on his non-throwing hand. That was splinted and taped up, to finish out the game there on Sunday against the Raiders. And the wide receiver, Josh Palmer, had 3 catches for 77 yards, and Keenan Allen had 3 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. However, though, the LA Chargers did not score at all in the second half, so that's definitely something they need to work on. We have seen that be their downfall in games past. We've seen them struggle offensively already at times this year. We obviously saw that in that Jaguars playoff loss last year. So they definitely do need to put points on the board in that second half. But they had some help from Khalil Mack, who had an absolutely incredible game, unheard of game. 10 tackles, 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 5 tackles for a loss. Absolutely ridiculous. Khalil Mack's 6 sacks ties him with a couple of other players for most sacks in a single game in the NFL history. The record, I want to say, is 7 sacks. The last time someone had 6 sacks in a game was in 2017, I want to say. Falcons defensive end was able to accomplish that statistic. The Cowboys got back to business, beating the Patriots 38-3. Mac Jones went 12 for 21, 150 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, and eventually got benched for quarterback Bailey Zappi. Unsure on, if it was more of a health concern kind of thing for Mac Jones. But my speculation is it was also an equally, time or attempt to evaluate Bailey Zappi again. He went 4 for 9, 57 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. It'll be interesting to see how the Patriots quarterback situation continues to develop throughout the rest of the season here. We did see Mac Jones was the only quarterback on the roster come the first initial 53-man cut, before the season started. And then they later signed, a couple guys to the practice squad and, elevated them a little. But that would be interesting to see. I would project Mac Jones will probably start next week. And then, they'll evaluate and go on a week-by-week basis up there in New England. Dak Prescott, 28 for 34, 261 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions. Got to shout out Central Michigan legend Cooper Rush, who got into the game. He went 2 for 2 with 20 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. It was late in the fourth quarter. But fire up chips with that one. Cooper Rush going 2-2, 4-1 as a starter last year in Dak's absence. Go Chips. Tony Pollard, 11 carries for 47 yards. And Kevontae Turpin had 1 rush, a 46-yard rush that really sparked them up there for a little bit. As well as a couple catches, I believe, not for any, significant yardage. Tight end Ferguson had 7 catches for 77 yards. CeeDee Lamb, 4 catches for 36 yards and a touchdown, as well as 1 carry for 12 yards. And that Dallas defense returned to top-notch form, scoring 2 touchdowns, as well as, having those 2 interceptions. One of them, I want to say, was a pick 6. The other one was a Leighton Vander Esch fumble, scoop, and score. The Cardinals and the 49ers. 49ers won that one 35-16. Quarterback Josh Dobbs for the Cardinals, though, continued to look solid. 28 for 41, 265 yards, and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. as well as 12 carries for 48 yards. So Josh Dobbs, I believe, is exceeding, I would probably say most, if not all, people's expectations they had of him, heading into the season. Been very efficient, been smart with the football for the most part, and taking what he can get on the ground at 4 yards per carry in this last game is not bad. And then running back James Conner had 11 carries for 52 yards. Hollywood Brown, 7 catches for 96 yards. And Michael Wilson, 7 catches for 76 yards and 2 touchdowns, all for the Cardinals. And then, on that 49ers offense, they continue to look very good. Brock Purdy had himself a very, very nice looking day. 20 for 21, 283 yards, 1 touchdown, as well as 2 carries for 0 yards, but he did have a touchdown. Excuse me. Wide receiver Brandon Ayuk had 6 catches for 148 yards, and then an absolutely amazing performance by Christian McCaffrey, 20 carries for 106 yards and 3 touchdowns, as well as 7 receptions for 71 yards and a touchdown, total of 177 yards and 4 touchdowns on the day for running back Christian McCaffrey. Absolutely crazy day for him. Helped lead those 49ers to the victory over the Cardinals, scoring 4 out of 5 of their touchdowns. The Chiefs and Jets game was definitely an interesting one. Zach Wilson played the best game he's had all season for sure. Potentially the best game that Zach Wilson has played in his career. I don't know the exact numbers, but in terms of his career, best. But Zach Wilson had 28 for 39, 245 yards, and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions against the Chiefs there on Sunday Night Football. And then Breece Hall, 6 carries for 56 yards. Allen Lazard, 3 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson, 9 catches for 60 yards. So the Jets offense, they looked all right. They looked solid. Zach Wilson, showed some definite improvement over the past couple of weeks where he's thrown several interceptions. Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense on the other side. Mahomes went 18 for 30, 203 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks, as well as 7 for 51 yards on the ground. Running back Isaiah Pacheco had a very nice looking game. Was making defenders miss. 20 carries for 115 yards and a touchdown, as well as 3 receptions for 43 yards. Travis Kelce, 6 catches for 60 yards. There was a sequence of questionable no call on a hold for the that would have been against the Chiefs, as well as a questionable call on defensive back Sauce Gardner to end out that game. Definitely a lot of upset fans, a lot of upset Jets fans. They thought they had a shot to win that game, which they did in this case, and are very upset with the what quite frankly looked like a blatant no call for sure with the holding there. You can clearly see the tackle's hands were outside the defender's frame, and he was trying to get off of it as Mahomes ran up the middle of the field there. The other one on Sauce Gardner, that one I would say is less questionable. I probably would say it shouldn't have been called. But, in the moment, the ref saw what he saw, and hindsight is always 20/20. And now moving on to the last game of the week, Monday Night Football's matchup. The Seahawks beat the Giants 24-3. Daniel Jones, 27 for 34, 203 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 picks. There's really nothing else noteworthy for that Giants offense or defense performance. Quarterback Geno Smith, 13 for 20, 110 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0 interceptions. Kenneth Walker, 17 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown. He's continuing to have a pretty solid sophomore season after, being one of the best, if not the best, rookie running backs last year for those Seahawks. And then DK Metcalf found the end zone again, 3 catches for 34 yards and a touchdown. The real talk of this game comes from the Seattle Seahawks defense. Bobby Wagner led the way with 17 tackles and 2 sacks, along with rookie cornerback Witherspoon, 7 tackles, 2 sacks, and a 97-yard pick six. That Seattle defense ended up finishing the game with 11 sacks and 2 interceptions against a Giants offense that is, quite frankly, one of the worst in the league up to this point so far. So that's the recap and analysis there. Quick thoughts on Week 4 matchups. And that leads me now into top 3 categories for some of the major stats. I'm just going to run through them really quickly. Pass yards, we got Tua with 1,306, Matthew Stafford 1,229, Kirk Cousins 1,214. Passing touchdowns, Kirk Cousins with 11, and then Tua, Josh Allen, and Russell Wilson all have 9. Rushing yards, Christian McCaffrey has 459, DeAndre Swift 364, and Bijan Robinson and James Conner both have 318. Rushing touchdowns, Mostert has 6, McCaffrey has 6, Montgomery, Karen Williams, and Kenneth Walker all have 5. Receiving yards, Justin Jefferson continues to lead the way, 543 yards. Puka Nacua has 501 yards, and Tyreek Hill has 470. And then for receiving touchdowns, Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs both have 4, while 11 players now have 3. In terms of tackles, Zaire Franklin for the Indianapolis Colts has 57. TJ Edwards from the Bears and Bobby Wagner both have 50 apiece. Sacks, Khalil Mack is leading the way in a 3-way tie with having those 6 on Sunday. Mack has 6, Josh Allen for the Jaguars has 6, and Steelers, TJ Watt has 6. In terms of interceptions, Jesse Bates has 3, Deron Bland has 3, who I believe he had 2 on in that most recent game against the Patriots. And then Jordan Whitehead still has 3 from Week 1, picking off Josh Allen 3 times. Now that leads me into this week's him performance of the week. A lot of tough choices this week. I believe this is the most difficult choice in terms of who's him from this season so far. Some of the him candidates this week: David Montgomery, Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, Khalil Mack, Christian McCaffrey, and Harrison Smith are some of the candidates. But ultimately, Week 4's him performance of the week has to go to Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack had 10 tackles, 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 5 tackles for a loss. Absolutely dominating performance by Khalil Mack. No matter what, they tried to chip him with a tailback a few times. It didn't matter. They tried to help him, with the set, having the guard step out as well. Did not matter. Khalil Mack, 6 sacks on the day, along with 5 tackles for a loss. One huge one at the end of the game to keep the Raiders out of scoring position. That ball, I believe, that possession was later an interception a couple plays later. So Khalil Mack, congratulations on Week 4 him performance of the week. Now moving up to Week 5 matchups. Just a little bit of a quick rundown, initial thoughts, a couple things to look at maybe. Just what comes to me off the top of my head for each matchup. Bears at Commanders for Thursday Night Football to kick off Week 5. That one's going to be in Washington. Washington has looked very, very good so far. I would say they've just played their best game against the Philadelphia Eagles, despite it being a loss. And the Bears have, besides the first 2.5 quarters of last week's game, a bad offense and one of the worst defenses in the league. The Ravens take on the Steelers in Pittsburgh. That's going to be interesting in terms of Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky and who ultimately gets to start for that one there. The Ravens should be getting some pieces back. The Ravens offense probably had collectively the best game they just had against the Browns. And they did that with several injuries on that offensive unit. A couple offensive linemen, couple receivers. So they could get a couple of those pieces back against a struggling Steelers team. that may be, starting a backup quarterback this week. The Panthers head to Detroit to play the Lions. The Lions, just came off a very nice Thursday night win, had a couple extra days rest, and then the Panthers struggled and lost to, at the time, the 0-3 Vikings. Bryce Young may be under pressure this week from that, Detroit Lions edge rush, most specifically Aiden Hutchinson. And then, wide receiver Jameson Williams is eligible to play this week after an updated gambling policy, updated violations for players. Jameson Williams is available, is allowed to play. So we'll see if he is ready to go and is active for this week's matchup. Jaguars at Buffalo Bills. Cornerback Tre'Davious White for the Bills is done for the season. He tore his Achilles. That's unfortunate news for him and that Buffalo Bills defense. But it's going to be interesting to see how their offense continues and to see if they can put up, crazy production with Diggs and Josh Allen for back-to-back weeks. It's kind of starting to be a trend here with the most dominating team performance, kind of being a letdown in the following week. The Bills, they were probably the most dominating offense collectively last week. So we'll see if that continues to be the case here. As well as we'll see if Trevor Lawrence can finally, fully start clicking. I feel like Trevor Lawrence has not been, showing what NFL fans and Jaguar fans have kind of saw the second half of last season. I do believe that Trevor Lawrence, whether it be new receivers, but something looks off, something looks different with Trevor Lawrence, who I was not the hugest believer on. A lot of people had him in his top five, in the top five for quarterbacks heading into the season. I did not. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is bad, but I do think he still has a couple of steps to go. And I think we've been seeing that, in these first 4 weeks here. The Giants head to Miami to take on the Dolphins. I would expect the Dolphins to return to form. They didn't play horrible against the Buffalo Bills, offensively at least. So I would expect them to, kind of reshape, refocus against a Giants team that is struggling and is probably, one of the bottom few teams in the league at this point. Saquon Barkley, I'm not sure. He's missed 2 weeks now. I believe that injury was originally speculated to be 1 to 3 week, sidelining. So we'll see if he's back for this matchup. Either way, I'm not sure it makes an incredibly large difference in this matchup with, first game back Saquon. The Saints head up to New England for the Patriots game. Patriots defensive end Matthew Judon has a biceps tear from what I'm hearing. He will miss time. And then cornerback, first-round draft pick out of Oregon, Christian Gonzalez, is dealing with a shoulder injury, and I believe he is going to miss time as well. In terms of the Saints, I would expect Alvin Kamara to have, more of an Alvin Kamara-esque game this week. Kind of felt things out after missing some time, as well as I would definitely expect Chris Olave to have more than 4 receiving yards. But I would not be surprised if Alvin Kamara puts up, crazy numbers this week here, especially with the couple of key injuries to that Patriots defense. Texans and the Falcons play each other in Atlanta. We'll see if C.J. Stroud can continue his early success against the Falcons defense that, the Falcons have not been, crazy good. They haven't been crazy bad. Desmond Ridder, I think each week is getting closer and closer to making the coaching staff question if Tyler Heineke should be starting. So we'll see how that develops. I do think the Falcons need to feed the ball to Bijan Robinson as much as possible, as he kind of seems to be, the only source of sunlight for their offense outside of, a little bit of Drake London. Kyle Pitts hasn't been utilized. And other than that, Ridder's kind of been struggling. So I think the Falcons' game plan for now needs to be put the ball in the best player's hands on their team, which is Bijan Robinson. Titans take on the Colts in Indianapolis. This is going to be an interesting one. Tannehill's kind of had a decent game and then a bad game, decent game, bad game. This week, Ryan Tannehill had a decent game. So if he continues that trend, that should make this one a bad one. Quarterback Anthony Richardson, on the other hand, though, has been absolutely balling for a rookie. After he missed a game with an injury, with the concussion, but other than that, he's been playing very well for a rookie. A little rough on the edges, but that's expected with all rookies. Jonathan Taylor is allowed to return after being on the physically unable to perform list. He will most likely be practicing this week. We will see on his situation if he's ready to go as well. Bengals take on the Cardinals in Arizona. I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Burrow takes a rest week. But they've been playing him up to this point. T. Higgins will miss time, I believe, with a rib fracture. And the Cardinals, they're not looking as bad as, most people probably originally thought. Their record's not great, but they've been competing. They've been playing well against good teams and obviously have the major upset on the Dallas Cowboys already only 4 weeks into the season. The Eagles head to LA to face the Rams. That one is going to be a very close game, I believe. The Rams have looked very, very good behind Matthew Stafford, who is really, showing his leading capabilities this year. I think with the help of Sean McVay, kind of locking back in on some things as well. And then the Chiefs take on the Vikings in Minnesota. Patrick Mahomes versus Kirk Cousins should be a good one. Both of those quarterbacks are, play very well at times. Mahomes doesn't really have, bad times, bad games in terms, let's say. Kirk Cousins does, but for the most part plays very well. Both of those quarterbacks were on Netflix's most recent quarterback series. So, they most likely will have some good conversations before and or after the game there. It's going to be two solid offenses going at each other. Should be a fun one to watch up in Minnesota. The Jets take on the Broncos in Denver. Both of these teams' defenses are, kind of horrendous. The Jets' defense is definitely better than the Broncos. They've been forcing some turnovers at least, and kind of keeping the Jets in these ball games. Allowing 23 to the Chiefs isn't bad. And keeping them in it against the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen forcing 4 turnovers. But I don't think the consistency with the Jets defense has quite been there. Denver Broncos defense is absolutely horrible. They allowed 70 to the Miami Dolphins and then, allowed 24 to the Justin Fields and the Bears' offense has been struggling for the entire season. Sunday Night Football this week, going to be an excellent matchup. Cowboys at 49ers. Two teams that are probably, top 5, top 6 teams right now. The Niners' offense has looked incredible. The Cowboys' defense has looked incredible. 3 out of 4 weeks. I think it's going to be an excellent matchup. Should definitely be a fun one to watch out there for San Francisco. And then Monday Night Football this week, Packers at Raiders. Both of them looking to bounce back against divisional losses. Packers lost to the Lions and the Raiders lost to the Chargers. Be interesting. Jimmy Garoppolo missed time with a concussion, I think. So he should be good to go. That will help out the Raiders offense. Instead of starting Aiden O'Connell once again. So now it is time to make my Week 5 picks. My Week 4 record was very, very good. If you haven't been listening, if you are listening, tell your friends about the picks. We know a thing or two. Last week we went 14-2, saying that, now I'll probably go 2-14 this week. But each week is each week. 14-2 last week. So far on the season, 44-20. Here's my picks for Week 5. I'm taking the Commanders over the Bears, Ravens over the Steelers, Lions over the Panthers, Bills over the Jags, Dolphins over the Giants, Saints over the Patriots, Texans over the Falcons, Colts over the Titans, Cardinals over the Bengals, Eagles over the Rams, Chiefs over the Vikings, Broncos over the Jets, 49ers over the Cowboys, and Raiders over the Packers. The Cleveland Browns, Chargers, Seahawks, and Buccaneers have a bye this week. So that's all I have for my Week 4 recap, Week 4 league recap. Thank you all for listening to episode 50 of the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. If you made it this far, please press that follow button right here on Spotify, as well as on Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron, where I post when a new episode will be coming out, as well as a couple other posts throughout the week. Thank you all for listening, and go Ravens.